And do you see yourselves as Jehovah God's spokespeople on earth?
That, I think, would seem to be quite presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson that God is using.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. You know what's good about this morning?
That the snow is finally melting and it's a beautiful spring day.
Well, that's one perspective. My perspective is you left me some coffee.
You've had way too much caffeine. You don't need any more. All right. We did a video years ago called, it was Watchtower's Credentials. And oh boy, did we have fun with that video. In fact, I think we did too.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of did an update with it. And I mean, it was just so much fun and so mock-worthy that we just had to keep harping on that one. So I'm going to put the link down below to that. But now we have Watchtower's channeling credentials.
Did they really give credentials for channeling? Did they really? I mean, I can just imagine some sort of Ouija board in this one.
I know, right? Okay. Now, I want to thank our friend XJW Elder's wife, Jane Doe. Thank you very much, sweetie. She was covering another article about Watchtower's history in a 1955 Watchtower. And it mentioned that Adam wrote, what, the first 5 chapters or something of Genesis.
Something to that effect.
Yeah. And it's like, what? You know, nowadays, everybody in the entire world credits Moses to writing the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah.
Right.
So it's like Adam wrote
Genesis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, at least that portion up to the flood, because, you know, by then Adam was long dead.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I had thought that was so shocking that I went to look at the article myself. And I have the 1955 Watchtower Bond volume. Well, in doing that, I came across another article, and I called her up, and I said, are you going to be covering this article? And she says, no, I'm going to be covering their history and going into the finished mystery book of 1917, 1920, you know, whatever version she has. So it's like, oh, okay, we got to cover this Watchtower's channeling credentials. And that's what the name of this article on page 301. This is the May 15th, 1955, page 301. Jehovah's Channel of Communication. And then there's an article after that called the Christian Channel of Communication. Now I'm just going to hit on a few things here that it's like, oh my goodness. Now I'm going to read their definition of the word channel on page 302. The word channel. In connection with literal water, the word channel is used to refer to a waterway, a watercourse, or an established stream of water. In a larger sense, the word channel is used to describe a means of conduction, a course into which something may be directed, a route through which anything passes or progresses. In this latter, larger way, the word channel is appropriately used with reference to Jehovah's age-old method of communication with his servants. But yet, if one of Jehovah's servants today says they're channeling Jehovah's Spirit, they're going to be accused of spiritism.
Or apostasy, at the very least.
At the very least. At the very least. Because when you go to the dictionary and look at the word channel up, yeah, the very first thing is like a waterway, direct toward a particular end or object, you know. But you notice they kind of water it down so that the Jehovah's Witnesses don't make the connection. Because the second one is serve as a medium for a spirit. And they give an example sentence like she was channeling the spirit of Billie Holiday. So this is what channeling means. Now we know back after Russell had died, they were saying that he was still leading the Bible students. Well, that is a channeling.
Spiritism.
Yeah, spirit channeling. Now, in this article over on page 306, they have a subheading above paragraph 19, Satan's mimic line of communication. So I got to ask, how can you tell the difference between Jehovah's channel of communication and Satan's line of communication? I guess he only talks to the governing body, so that's how you know. If he's talking to you, it ain't him.
Well, that's something that the rest of the 144,000 should begin to recognize, because in this concept of the 144,000, the little flock, how come the other 144,000 around the world are not also channeling Jehovah's Spirit? You see, this is what they all miss. They don't stop and think that when Watchtower says, Jehovah is channeling his, through his organization, it's only the people at the typewriters, the monkeys and the typewriters, that Jehovah's really channeling.
Yeah.
AKA the governing idiots.
Yeah. Well, even on page 305, they're talking about the Word, Jesus, channeling information. And I mean, they even mentioned Balaam's ass, that God used Balaam's ass for supernatural communications that reached the earth. The agent, generally a human, although once the ass of Balaam was used, that would also refer to the governing body.
Of course, Balaam's ass.
I digress. Is referred to biblically as a prophet if he is a male servant of God, or a prophetess if a woman. The prophet in turn speaks out the communication as God's spokesman on earth. He publishes it to the many whom God intends to hear it, if other than a single person is being specifically addressed. The prophet then becomes the immediate earthly channel through which the waters of life-giving truth are conveyed to earth's thirsting residents. Thus, Jehovah's earthly channel of communication is identified. Not really. The earthly channel is either a prophet or a collective prophet-like organization.
See, and that's a misleading statement from Watchtower when what Kim just read. Thus, the earthly channel is identified. They are conveniently overlooking scriptural identifications, and I will get to that when it's appropriate to this conversation.
But dear, they have the 12 means that you can identify their credentials.
No, 12? You mean like the 12 apostles? Like the
There's 12.
12 zodiacs? I mean,
There's 12.
there's- interesting, isn't it, friends?
Now, in this article, I'm not going to read, all of it, but just looking at the subheadings. The prophet Noah, a channel. The prophet Abraham, a channel. And then we get to the next article, Christian channel of communication. And when you go over to page 311, there's a subheading in the first column, preparation of prophetical organization. This is when it gets good. Like the prophets Noah, Elijah, Elisha, and John the Baptist, Jesus the prophet gathered disciples around him and trained them to become preachers. However, unlike these others, he was preparing these disciples to become a nucleus around which a continuous prophetical organization, a channel of communication, would be established.
That's a whole lot of words for a Jehovah's Witness to be confused about, isn't it?
A continuous prophetical organization. That means it would have had to have existed from the 1st century until present day. What about the Dark Ages?
Uninterrupted.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why Jehovah's Witnesses will preach, well, there's always been a little remnant of the faithful slave, even during the Dark Ages. Look at all the people they burned at the stake. The Christians burned at the stake. See, those were possibly the 144,000, that little remnant that would still be in existence all through the ages, whom, Jehovah was communicating with.
At the bottom of page 311, there's a subheading, Prophetical Organization Established, and it goes on to talk about Pentecost 33, about the 120 members of the Christian congregation were anointed. You know, I just had a message from our source, and he was talking about, since it's memorial season for Jehovah's Witnesses, at the Lord's evening meal, those apostles were not yet anointed or appointed.
That's right.
But yet they were put into that covenant. So they were not yet anointed. That's a good point, though. Think about it, Jehovah's Witnesses. They were not anointed until Pentecost 33 CE. So how could they be part of that little flock?
Well, see, there again, that's how simple it is to starve a disciple of Jesus to death by not allowing them to eat the blood and drink, to eat the body and drink the blood. And all Jehovah's Witnesses miss this because, well, there's a reason for this, which I will explore in a little bit.
Page 313, subheading, Early Unclear Views, No Detraction. Does all this then demonstrate that God's channel on earth since Jesus' day was weakened and adulterated with error? Well, obviously.
Well, it says no. But yet, when you listen to what Jane Doe has been reading, they admit the errors.
Yeah, but listen to the reason. No, to the contrary, it demonstrates there was no flood of water choking volume at any one moment of time, but rather a calm, steady flow of new waters of truth through a set channel.
What the hell does that mean?
Well, I'll put it into something that just happened in the world that you may be able to see the connection. The Suez Canal. It just had a ship that actually got stuck in the mud and turned sideways and was blocking the whole channel or canal. So, this is why Jehovah gives them just a little bit of real truth at a time.
It's progressive.
Because he doesn't want to choke up, the canal and block everything. Because Jehovah's Witnesses might wake up.
That's right. You just have to dumb them down a little at a time, and then they'll be completely ignorant to what the Bible really says.
Now, this is when I thought, this is insulting to what they're saying. Now, I also want to say that this article is available on jw.org, and I'm going to put the link down below to that, because this is still on their website, and Jehovah's Witnesses can go look at this themselves. And you ex-members, you can show your family this right from their website. So going on with paragraph 17. All right. The many men and women brought into this prophetical organization of the anointed congregation had preconceived, unclear views as to Jehovah's purposes.
Now, let me get this straight. We have thousands and thousands of years of the Old Testament being written, and Watchtower is still unclear?
Oh, no, it was those 144,000 brought into the prophetical organization.
Oh, they were the unclear ones.
Yeah, they're the dummies.
Jeez.
It would take time gradually to change over their thinking. And our friend Jane Doe has been covering, when Jesus came to inspect them in 1914 to 1919, and he chose them, the Bible students, as this means of, channel, this organization. They were still celebrating Christmas. They were still using the cross. They were still wearing beards, and all of this. And Jesus chose them. So you see, it would take time gradually to change over their thinking. They had a lot of strange ideas back then. And look up until 2010, they thought that generation would by no means pass away. So even up until the present day, they still have an unclear...
Well, that's obvious.
Yeah.
That's obvious.
Unclear view of Jehovah's purposes, obviously. Otherwise, you would have got it right the first time. And then Garrett Lotion, one of the broadcasts, says, Would you trust? Do you trust the faithful slave? Jesus does.
Jesus does.
Butterfingers. God knew that as mere men they could not mentally grasp, understand, or retain a flood of new truths at one time, which figuratively might throw them off balance and drown them. Jehovah in his mercy and loving consideration for his weaker servants arranged for a gradual flow of the waters of new truth to them in an orderly channeled way. Gradually their minds would be adjusted and become filled with a progression of new things. So I have to ask, since Watchtower keeps changing and getting new light constantly, at what point can you say, okay, I think they finally have the truth. I think Jehovah has finally revealed all this to them. Because as long as they keep getting rid of old light and getting new light, that means your training is not done.
Well, there again, it goes back to what I've said. You worship a God of confusion. Confusion.
Yeah. All right, going over to page 314, 12 requirements for Christian channel today.
12 requirements, just like the 12 zodiacs.
What of Jehovah's Christian channel of communication today? Which of the hundreds of sects and denominations of those who claim to be Christian is Jehovah's spokesman today in the earth as his divinely appointed and organized channel of communication? Oh, well, it can't be Jehovah's Witnesses because governing body Jeffrey Jackson testified before the Asura Commission that that would be presumptuous to say they are the only channel.
Now, also keep in mind, if Jesus and Jehovah inspected all religions, Jesus and Jehovah were looking at these 12 qualifying marks. Bear that in mind, friends, that Jehovah and Jesus obviously had these 12 qualifiers already in mind when they chose Jehovah's Witnesses.
The Bible indicates many specifications, all of which, aka credentials, all of which have to exist together to mark beyond a shadow of a doubt the one divinely authorized channel.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Talk about loaded bullshit. That's what I call crapping on your plate and calling it a brownie.
Paragraph 21. First, the congregation of Christ of the 20th century must know what the name of its God is as revealed by Jesus to his earthly disciples, and must become witnesses of this majestic name, even as were the prophets of old, Jesus and the first century Christians. Okay, now in what scriptures did it actually say Jehovah? It has the Tetragrammaton, but I mean, as far as the Christian Greek scriptures, him saying the Lord's Prayer, he says,
Our Father.
Our Father.
But it's even more simpler than that, sweetheart. When the Watchtower organization admits that the name Jehovah is a Catholic invented name, then whose name are you using? It appears to me that Jehovah gave that name to the Roman Catholic Church long before you came on scene. Think about it, JWs. So that's not a qualifier because the Catholic Church was already in recognition of that name from Raymundus Martini. Do your research.
Well, back to the 13th century. That's where it goes back to. So that would mean that the Roman Catholic Church is part of this channel.
The channel.
They have one of the, credentials of this being the channel.
Yep.
Just saying.
And then you got to ask yourselves why to this day the Roman Catholic Church doesn't use the name Jehovah. Why? Why, Watchtower? Is it because maybe they recognized it's a fallacy?
Paragraph 22. Second, the congregation of Christ, started by Jesus as the channel, is made up of all anointed ones who are spirit begotten with a hope of ruling with Christ in heaven, and whose number is set at 144,000, which group of Christians in the earth today gives evidence of being the remnant of this 1900 years old, richly matured congregation of Christ in its works and beliefs. only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses. But that would be presumptuous.
Well, here's the second way to debunk this. Jesus said, and I have other sheep that are not of this fold. So in that statement, Watchtower takes out the other sheep that Jesus was supposed to bring into the fold.
Third, the congregation of Christ must be marked distinctly by being persecuted among the nations for her integrity to biblical principles and for her uncompromising virgin purity to Christ Jesus as the King of the new world. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses and their companions have such a distinguishing mark by being persecuted the world over. Okay, first of all, you are not being persecuted for your integrity to biblical principles. You're being persecuted in the world for being a bunch of pervos and hiding child abuse.
Among other things.
Yeah, and your hate speech and everything else. So this has nothing about your virgin purity to Jesus Christ as the King of the new world and your integrity to biblical principles.
And let's face it, back in 1955, mainstream Christianity saw what you guys were doing. You were getting away from, Christian holidays, the Christian cross, the love of neighbor. You didn't do this because you love your neighbor. You did this because you were irritating the hell out of mankind from your door-to-door nonsense. Basically saying, unless you become a Jehovah, you're going to die at Armageddon. People don't want to hear that. Even today, they don't want to hear that.
Fourth, the congregation of Christ must accept all the progressive revelations of the one true religion as contained in the Hebrew Scriptures, channeled through all the prophets of old down to John the Baptist, and in the Greek Scriptures channeled through Christ Jesus and his disciples. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses and their companions, the other sheep, do. Well, like I said, at what point are you going to say, this constant channeling and old light, new light, this is, and you have to accept all the progressive revelations. And that's why a lot of us are kicked out and marked as despicable apostates, like Anthony Morris calls us, because we no longer accept their progressive revelations.
Well, here again. The generation of 1914 will not pass away unless all these things occur, including the Great Tribulation. That generation is dead and gone. So now the progressive revelation is now the overlapping generations, and now more precisely 2 generations. At what point do the Jehovah's Witnesses begin to realize these guys are just monkeys in a suit and tie? There is no progressive revelation when it comes to the Watchtower organization. It's the same old nonsense. Believe what we say or else. Do you trust the faithful slave? Jesus does. They just can't sort through it.
You're going to like this next one.
Okay.
Fifth, the congregation of Christ must realize it went through a scattering period leading to a Babylonian spiritual captivity from which there must have been a regathering of his chosen ones together from the 4 winds, from one extremity of the heavens to other extremity. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses who have been regathered since 1919 from all nations, languages, and former religious associations realize this. So they were scattered into Babylonish.
Well, here again, they're using ancient history to make a modern day qualifier for themselves.
Well, they were in this Babylonish teachings, like Jane Doe has been bringing out, even after 1919.
When Jesus gathered them, when Jehovah and Jesus, chose them as the one channel.
I have a picture that was taken inside of Bethel, them all sitting at the table celebrating Christmas in the 20s. So this was after 1919.
But see, that's why they have to use the word progressive revelation.
And you can even go into the JW's Proclaimer's book and see this, that they still had these beliefs clear into the 20s and 30s. 6. The congregation of Christ must keep spiritually awake for the return of our Lord Jesus Christ, and when he comes invisibly with attention to this earth's affairs, she must accept him and receive the joy and delight of the King's presence as ruler. I thought he returned invisibly in 1914.
Well, but depending on what Watchtower article, he returned invisibly sometime in the 1800s.
Yeah. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses have been spiritually awake to realize this great event of Christ's enthronement in heaven in 1914.
See, that's why they were spiritually awake, so that later in history, as the progressive history of Watchtower comes to be down to our day, it's now an overlapping generation that will not pass away. Come on, Jehovah's Witnesses, everything you need to escape this fear has already been put in print.
7th, the congregation of Christ, after the return of her Lord, must, as the house of God, receive her judgment when Jehovah's messenger comes to the temple for judgment, and this prior to the rest of the world. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses experienced this judgment cleansing when the messenger came to his temple in 1918. No, you didn't,
No.
because you were still celebrating Christmas and using the cross into the 20s.
And you're still hiding crimes to this very day.
You're still going through cleansing. 8th, the
Cleansing? They're being crucified in hell. Look at what us ex-members are doing. Why? Because Watchtower still has this nonsense up on jw.org.
8th, the congregation of Christ, when cleansed, must have received the commendation of her Lord by being designated the faithful and discreet slave whom his master appointed over his domestics to give them their food at the proper time. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses have realized this office since 1919, since when they have made a supreme effort to channel forth clean spiritual food to all those in association with them as Christ's domestics.
I hear this, and all I hear is Jeffrey Jackson saying, well, that would be presumptuous. That would be But when you wrote this, Watchtower, you didn't presume a damn thing. You were convinced. Why? Because you had seven other qualifiers convincing you of this nonsense, trying to convince your other members of this nonsense. You know, the other sheep, the other flock that Jesus, you are trying to convince with nonsense is what you're doing. And guess what? The uninformed swallow it, hook, line, and sinker. How do I know? Because I was part of the uninformed.
See, the thing is back then they viewed it as the 144,000 as the channel, as a collective group.
Exactly.
Nowadays, they've changed it. The faithful and discreet slave, that channel is only the governing body.
Yeah. So there's another requalifier on this, Jehovah's Witnesses. You just don't get it.
Well, that means the anointed have been demoted, and they don't have anything to do with the channel of spiritual food.
And I can absolutely prove that. For the rest of you 144,000 who disagree with this, why don't you march up to Warwick and see if you can get through to that closed door on a Wednesday morning when the governing body are drinking their alcohol and smoking their big cigars and change things. Oh, you can't do it because you refuse to see that this is nothing but a business, a publishing house pretending to be a religion.
9th, the congregation of Christ must receive in the last days the special commission that this good news of the kingdom must be preached in all the inhabited earth for the purpose of a witness to all the nations, and then the accomplished end will come. Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses, together with their companions, have published information concerning the establishment of Christ's kingdom in 1914, which publication has now reached into 160 lands of earth. Okay, there's many religions that claim to be preaching about the good news of Christ's kingdom.
Mormons.
The Mormons, they have over 14 million members, and they have a website and literature just like what Jehovah's Witnesses are printing. So, and they're actually in more lands now than Jehovah's Witnesses, because there's lands that Jehovah's Witnesses are banned that the Mormons are not. So, you can't use that anymore, because then that would say, God appears to be blessing them when they have a lot more members than Jehovah's Witnesses. 10th, the Congregation of Christ must today follow its first century pattern by receiving progressive understandings of Bible prophecies which unfold further majestic purposes of the living God, and which new light of truth must be published impartially the world over by God's prophet-like organization.
Oh, and there's the paragraph that sinks them. Prophets.
Because they say they're not prophets.
But they are prophets.
Only the remnant of Jehovah's anointed witnesses and their companions do not treat prophesying with contempt, but publish their fulfillments as they become clear in their Bible publications.
How is it not contemptible when you're asked a question of a governing body member, and that governing body member says, well, that would be presumptuous. That's contempt for your appointment, because you lack the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, yes, that's what we've always printed, that's what we believe. Right or wrong, that's what we believe. But no, instead, you hold the information contemptible by saying, well, that would be presumptuous.
Yeah.
See, it's just that simple.
So they lied under oath to the Australian Royal Commission.
Because they lack the intestinal fortitude to stand up and say, yes, we do believe this. Right or wrong, we do believe it.
Yeah. Because look at how many that statement has woken up.
That statement has woke up thousands.
Yeah. 11th, the Congregation of Christ must realize a change in her work from that of gathering the little flock for heavenly privileges to that of gathering out the other sheep to become prospective kingdom subjects to live happily forever on a paradise earth that is destined to continue unendingly in fulfillment of the great Abrahamic promise. Only the anointed remnant have experienced this since the years 1932 and 1935.
Behold, the great crowd.
Their last credential.
Well, just backing up a little bit, when they say right here, to become a happy subject in this new system of things, let me ask all of you ex-members, again, by show of hand, how many of you would want to live with rulers like the Watchtower Babel Crap Society?
Nope.
No way. You know why? Because the very things that they're practicing today as Jehovah's chosen progressive organization are the very things they're going to continue to practice in that new world of theirs. If you don't comply, you're going to die. Think about all of the millions upon millions of resurrected people that don't comply. They're going to die. You may have a great uncle, a great grandfather that come back and, oh, I never met my great grandfather. Oh, look, my great grandfather, it's nice to meet you, yada, yada, yada. Oh, by the way, unless you become a Jehovah, you're going back to the grave forever. What kind of peace? What kind of truth? Why would anybody in their right frame of mind want to subjugate themselves to that type of authority?
After putting up with elders for, 30-something years, and their lies and the injustice and them beating you down, why would any of us want to be subjugated to the elders' rule, iron-fisted rule, ever again, and especially for 1,000 years or into eternity?
Yeah.
No.
Now, Matt, just remember how Watchtower qualifies them. The princes on earth. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no.
Yeah.
See, your elders are going to be these princes on earth.
Well, they're a real fine, shining example. Just look at the Illinois court case that we've been covering, you know. Yeah, see, and the thing is the state attorney realizes now this is not a one-time incident. This is not an isolated case. They are finding out now that this is a systemic problem and that this is Watchtower policies and their rules. So guess what? It kind of changes things in this court hearing.
Is this happening in the United States of America?
In Illinois.
Imagine that. Just wait for it, guys. I told you a long time ago. Long time ago, I told you it's going to happen in other points of the earth, and then it's going to implode. It's going to come right back here to home. It's going to roost right on top of Watchtower.
Yeah.
Just got to give it the proper time, and we have to know how to do it. And using articles such as this and other articles is the way to do it. Proper food, the proper time, to the real authority. And it's not Watchtower.
Yeah. And that's the thing is I've always said, even, you know, those that I used to work with in Australia, and they were so gung-ho to get journalists' attention, to get these articles out into the media. That's fine and dandy. These articles are great. You know, just like the articles written in Belgium about, and, you know, all these other places. It's great. You know, these articles do bring attention, but I feel the more important thing is we need to be helping these state attorneys and these courts and get them to realize, you know, this is where it is. Your legislative, you know, of your state, you know, your state representatives, state attorneys, all of that. And it's like, that's why I always say, I get messages all the time of people saying, hey, I've got this information. Okay, contact your local state attorney. Don't contact me. Contact your local state attorney and give them this information.
But the thing is you have to know that that information is there, because if you don't know it's there, you're not going to know how to use it. You know, like I've said 1,000 times before, all this stuff is good. But your news media, if they don't know what this stuff says and how to apply it, it all becomes a moot point. It all becomes moot. You have to know how to use this to bury Watchtower.
Yeah, you know, and let's face it, the news media is not 100% trustworthy anymore.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, it is not trustworthy. You know, they can take an article and put their own spin on it because they're biased, you know, and we have an example of that a few months ago. You know, some XJWs told a journalist some information, and, you know, she went and published this article. And it's like, oh no, this is what I was told. You know, I'm not going to change it. She's edited it a lot of times. But see, this is the thing, is they can only go on what the ex-members tell them. And then, you know, they take their idea of this and change it. And it may not be the truth. So, you know, to me, this is a waste of time trying to wine and dine the journalists, the media, to get articles when so much more precious time can be diverted to contacting these state attorneys, the legislative, you know, branch of your state, your representatives, whatever, you know, anyone that can do it. You know, I would love to see a Senate hearing in the United States which would be equal to the Australian Royal Commission. You know, here in this country they call them Senate hearings. But unfortunately now, our government are a bunch of 5-year-olds, and they can't even get along and get anything done. So, you know, what's the use? It's pointless. You cannot get anything done when there's so much division within your own government.
Oh, that's like Watchtower. Look at how divided Watchtower is.
Yeah.
That's why Jehovah can't bring the new system, because you're all divided.
Yeah.
Just making a point, connecting a dot.
Okay, going back to the article here. Paragraph 32, 12th. the congregation of Christ must realize the certain time when Jehovah plants the new heavens and lays the foundation of the new earth as part of his permanent new world system of things. New world order.
New world order.
Only Jehovah's Witnesses realize this and have come to know that since 1919, a New World Society is developing to expand to fill the whole earth in righteousness.
And there is your deceptive lie, because they have to realize that when Jehovah plants the new heavens and lays the foundation for the new earth as part of the permanent new world order, you mean cancel culture. That's what this entails in the new world order. Canceling everybody who's awake to the nonsense. Okay? You got to realize that this has been happening since 1919, and the New World Society is developing to expand to fill the whole earth in nonsense. It's not righteousness, Watchtower, because you've already proved that you will cancel anybody, disfellowship, label them as a white apostate. Do you people see the dots that are connecting in our society today? Do you see it? I hope you do, because this is a very dangerous point in human history. When the Watchtower has made us all go from door to door for decades with the scriptures in 2 Timothy 3, 1 through 5. But know this, in the last days, critical times, hard to deal with, one of those scriptures is they will have no natural affection. It ain't the first time I've said this in front of this camera. Your family members have no natural affection if they refuse to listen to you, to understand, comprehend why you left this organization. You would rather believe 8 strangers, the voice of strangers, than the voice of your flesh and blood. That natural affection is done and gone. Why? Because it's all encompassed in cancel culture.
Yeah, and they claim, the whole earth is going to be in righteousness. Well, if you have so many pervos in your organization, it can't be that righteous.
That's right.
And you claim Jehovah will, destroy those who are evil and abusing children. Well, guess what? You know how many you're going to lose?
Bear in mind, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Australian Royal Commission. Okay, bear that in mind. This article was written in 1955. The Australian Royal Commission identified the systemic problem going all the way back to the 50s. So when this article was being written, I'll bet you the farm that Watchtower already knew the systemic problem existed.
All right, so I just have a little bit more to cover in this article. Page 315, the subheading, Keep in Close Touch with Channel. The evidences, therefore, are overwhelming that the anointed Christian remnant among Jehovah's Witnesses today comprise the collective channel of communication. An abundance of additional detailed facts is being published in the series of articles in the Watchtower on the history of Jehovah's Witnesses. And that's, Jane Doe has been covering their history.
Yep.
There are about 17,000 of these anointed ones still left in the earth, with a governing body of them residing at Bethel in Brooklyn, New York. So I'm just going to skip over to the next page, paragraph 34. An official mouthpiece for this slave class is the Watchtower magazine. Now in its 70th 6-year publication, this magazine makes no claim of inspiration, but is guided by the inspired principles and prophecies recorded in the sacred Bible due for progressive fulfillment today. By means of this singular channel of reliable spiritual guidance, all sincere, honest persons who love righteousness are being directed toward the perfect day in the post-Armageddon new world.
What a bunch of loaded malarkey. Good Lord Jesus, Mary and Joseph. you guys understand what a shit show this is for Watchtower? Do you even begin to comprehend that? But guess what? Every ounce of their words comes right out of the Holy Bible. They admit it themselves.
Well, like I said, I'm going to put the link down below to, what we've talked about in this article, because show this to your family, because it's still available on jw.org. They admit to be channeling,
Yeah.
Jehovah and Jesus. So, that's all there is to say about that. All right, our battery's going dead, and so we're going to go to a part 2 on this because Mike has a few things to cover. Thank you for watching.